Who am I? Where did I come from? And what is my life about? Astounded by the Buddha's answer. Welcome back, everyone, to Mind Podcast. Have you ever wondered, who am I? Where did I come from? Where will I go? Why? And what is the purpose of my existence? These are undoubtedly profound questions that concern not only you, but all of humanity. Who am I? This poignant question must have been raised since the dawn of time, when humans first became aware of their existence in this life. In the course of each of our lives, it seems to arise at some early point that we hardly remember, only to persistently follow us until the very end. Who am I to come and go in this life without knowing the cause and purpose? Who am I to emerge from nothingness as a being full of desires? Who am I to ultimately leave this life as an inevitability, even while still deeply cherishing it? Why was I born? Why must I die? Why and why? If we cannot answer such questions, we will never truly understand the significance of our existence in this life, nor can we grasp the meaning of our actions, whether they aim for a noble life or are merely a struggle for a better one. However, there are different ways to answer a question. For instance, an answer can provide the content that the questioner wants to know. Those who try to answer in this way often construct an image of a creator, such as believing that humans were created by a god, born from the divine power of that god. If we accept this, it means we have found the answer to the above questions. And if we have further related questions, perhaps we will have to wait until we meet this god. But it seems that the civilization of humanity in the 21st century no longer accepts such imaginative answers. We need a more rational way of understanding so as not to feel that we are living a meaningless life, merely waiting for the end without understanding the reason or knowing where we will go. Thus, the effort to answer by providing the content the questioner seeks has failed. Another way to respond is to analyze the very content of the question. If the questioner can recognize the irrationality in the question, they will no longer desire an answer, and in that sense, they can be considered satisfied. The Buddha chose this method by analyzing the meaning of the word self in the question and pointing out that there is no such self that truly exists. When there is no self, the question, who am I, becomes irrational, simply because it is impossible to provide any image or concept to describe something that does not exist. Therefore, one cannot be anyone when the self does not exist. A series of related questions can be considered simultaneously answered. We need not worry about the coming and going of a self that does not exist. Instead, the more pertinent questions now shift to another realm. How can such a non-existent self appear to exist so vividly in our consciousness? And how can a world full of such non-existent selves operate according to very real principles, creating the complex interdependent karmic conditions for all beings in this realm? Answering these questions becomes a process of active cultivation, a contemplation that delves into the very origins of all phenomena and the causes and conditions that govern them. In the scriptures, the Buddha often explained that the self of each being is a collection of aggregates, specifically composed of 5 aggregates, each of which is itself a collection of various factors. These 5 aggregates are form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. In this analysis, form refers to the aggregation of sounds, colors, smells, tastes, and the senses like eyes, ears, nose, and tongue. Each element is necessary to form what is called the form aggregate. The form aggregate also includes the senses themselves, like eyes, ears, nose, and tongue, as well as their objects, because all are composed of matter. These are what we can observe. Sensation refers to the feelings that arise when our body comes into contact with external objects, such as pleasure, pain, or indifference. Perception refers to the recognition and differentiation of objects after contact, such as distinguishing whether something is long or short, large or small, blue, yellow, white, or red, and even determining whether something is good or bad, right or wrong. The mechanism operates by searching in memory for past images related to the object, thereby identifying and distinguishing it. Mental formations encompass all mental activities or responses of the mind after contact and perception, such as liking, disliking, praising, or criticizing. The mental formation aggregate is complex as it covers a wide range of activities and can serve as a cause for other physical and mental activities, while other aggregates like form, sensation, and perception are merely existing phenomena that do not create causes. Thus, mental formations have two distinct roles. They act as an effect when the mind's reactions result from other conditions and factors. They also act as a cause when the mind's reactions become conditions leading to actions of the body, speech, and mind. In this sense, the activities of the body, speech, and mind are expressions of the mental formation aggregate and the result of its influence. The final aggregate is consciousness, which refers to the function of awareness manifested in all senses, such as eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and even mind consciousness. Such detailed analysis provides us with a true understanding of the so-called self that exists in this life. Each element analyzed here manifests very tangibly in our ordinary perception. Still, it reveals its fragile, compounded nature due to dependent origination when examined under the light of prajna wisdom. Through this, we can see that the results of cultivating insight into emptiness also help us recognize the compounded nature of a self that we have long regarded as a single, solid, and enduring entity. Buddhism calls this correct understanding the insight of non-self, meaning there is no enduring, independent self in the reality we perceive. Recognizing the fragile, compounded, and non-real nature of the self formed from the five aggregates does not mean denying its existence in this phenomenal world. On the contrary, this correct understanding helps the self become better and more meaningful during its existence, instead of being driven and urged by desires to nourish, maintain, and protect a non-real self, causing endless harm to oneself and others. We can examine the issue more clearly and understand what should be done to bring true happiness in this life by recognizing that this compounded self exists in a relative world, functioning according to the principles of dependent origination and causality, where all our emotions and thoughts continuously arise and cease in this flow. Thus, we objectively understand that our actions, speech, or thoughts determine whether that self exists in peace and happiness or is submerged in suffering and distress. In other words, we have the choice to decide how our existence unfolds in the phenomenal world without accepting it as the decree of any mystical, supernatural, or predetermined force. It is all up to us. Causality is a complex equation with many factors contributing to the outcome. The most decisive factors are always our awareness and thoughts. As the Dhammapada teaches, mind precedes all phenomena. Mind is their chief. They are all mind-made. If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. Mind precedes all phenomena. Mind is their chief. They are all mind-made. If with a pure mind a person speaks or acts, happiness follows him like his never-departing shadow. These verses offer simple, understandable yet profound teachings that can serve as a guiding principle throughout our lives. With the right belief and understanding of the principle stated in the verse, we will no longer be confused by life's storms and will clearly discern what actions to take or avoid, depending on whether we seek happiness or suffering. By abandoning the mistaken belief in a fixed, separate self, existing independently of external objects, we can escape the bonds of desires centered around a non-real self. We will realize that we do not truly need to protect or build up the self to attain happiness as we once thought. Even when we try everything to satisfy the demands of that self, we still cannot achieve happiness because true happiness only comes when we speak and act with a pure and kind mind. Here are some questions that might arise. Can I strive to act with a pure mind without changing my perception of the self? To me, it is a very real entity, entirely distinct from all other entities and objects. Without the self, what foundation would I have for my practice? And without the self, even if I achieve happiness, who would experience it? These questions seem reasonable and are likely common among most people, as they stem from the deep-rooted assumption of a self that has long been accepted as a given. The truth is, without the Buddha's detailed and clear guidance, we would find it challenging to reflect deeply enough to recognize the compounded and temporary nature of the self. Furthermore, even after contemplating the non-real nature of the self, completely letting go of attachment to it remains a long and difficult process, requiring perseverance and wisdom to gradually succeed. Buddhist terminology refers to the clinging attachment to the non-real, compounded self as self-attachment. And the practice is a process of eliminating this attachment to achieve the correct understanding known as non-self. By seeing through the temporary and fragile nature of this compounded body and mind, we can let go of all attachments to it. To answer the first question, can we cultivate a pure mind without letting go of the self? Or, to put it differently, does accepting the self as a solidly existing entity pose any obstacles to acting with a pure mind? This is a practical question, but it has already been answered in our real-life experiences. Answering this question also resolves the doubts in the other questions. In reality, if we could find true happiness simply by acting with a pure and kind mind without letting go of self-attachment, then the practice of non-self would be unnecessary. But that is not the case. Self-attachment will pollute our mind from the moment any thought arises, even a wholesome one. For example, when you feel the urge to give and help others, self-attachment will simultaneously generate obstructive thoughts by comparing yourself with the recipient, making you feel a sense of loss when you give away what is yours. And when you do give, you might hope for some future reward for this self because you performed a virtuous act. These subtle thoughts arise naturally based on self-attachment, and we rarely pay attention to them. As a result, our good deeds are challenging to initiate, and even if we manage to carry them out, their positive impact will be significantly reduced. The Diamond Sutra refers to this as attachment to form while giving. We make clear distinctions between the giver, the receiver, and the gift, and it is this very distinction that gives rise to the thoughts mentioned earlier. When we reflect on the compounded nature of the five aggregates and realize that there is no self, we simultaneously understand that all phenomena arise due to causes and conditions, without any permanent, substantial existence. From this understanding, we can let go of attachment and clinging to a self that doesn't exist. As a result, when we cultivate virtues such as compassion, loving kindness, equanimity, or the paramitas like generosity, morality, and patience, we will no longer be hindered by self-attachment. Through his own experiences, the Buddha clearly stated in many scriptures that self-attachment is the root of countless mental afflictions. Each of us can personally experience this truth by reflecting on our minds to observe how mental afflictions like greed, anger, jealousy, and envy arise. Without self-attachment as a foundation, these mental states have no ground to arise. Furthermore, even when these mental states have already arisen, if we practice contemplating non-self, we will immediately notice a reduction in their influence over our thoughts, actions, and speech. We will have more choices and autonomy rather than being unconsciously driven by greed, anger, jealousy, and envy.